testing out this new paper I recently purchased at Walmart. It was approximately $20 including tax. For 30 sheets, that makes it 66 cents per page. It's acid-free watercolor paper, 15 by 11 inches, 38.1 centimeters by 27.9 centimeters, cold-pressed, 140 pound, 300 gram, heavyweight paper. This NorthShore paper is a paper I've never tried before. I carefully label out my test sheets and get to work on figuring out what this paper is good for. I try to use all paper, and I try to find the most effective way of using the papers. So I'm still going to use it, but it still might be a paper I prefer more than another paper, or one I don't prefer, and we'll find special uses for either way. On all previous paper test pages, I used Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus Fine Watercolor, the liquid watercolors, 34H turquoise blue in the upper corner. That way I can compare this on every single paper type. I'm also testing both the front and the back of the paper, which feels different. The front side is much rougher and the back side is much smoother, and the way that all the paint acts on the page is different. Even the color looks slightly different. I don't know if it's more extreme in real life, but in general when I look at them, I can tell the difference a little better versus on camera, but the way the paint moves, looks, and feels on the paper is slightly different on the front side versus the back side. The sides are not confusing. As I said, there's much more texture on one side than the other, so you know which side you're using. I'm pretty sure the back side is not intended to be used at all, but that doesn't mean we can't use it. You're allowed to use your art supplies however you choose, not necessarily how they're intended to be used. As you saw, I also tested regular watercolors and some Himimiya gouache as well. I start sketching in the final artwork I'm going to work on here with the paper. I changed the composition from an original sketch in my sketchbook where I made this fish and lotus originally with a bunch of swirly twirly designs. I'll ask you to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you're really enjoying my content. Mixed up a bunch of bright colors by getting very bright reds and oranges and more glowing reds, and yellow, more glowing yellow, golden orange, and I used it in a sketchbook page before. I extremely liked what I did there and decided to rearrange it a little for a full-size artwork. I cut and measured the page to fit in a particular frame after taking out the other artwork that used to be in it and storing that away. This painting is something I'm very happy with and is now up on my wall actually. I worked in layers. I started with the more wet techniques and put a bottom layer that I let fully dry before moving on. If at any point it would bleed into the color next to an area and I didn't want that effect, I had to let the painting fully dry before coming back to it. Overall, for the lighter layers, I used softer, more natural hair brushes, and I made sure that everything was fully dry before coming back, as I already said, because I didn't want unfortunate bleeding. I also referenced the original artwork in my sketchbook to find the exact colors I was using and to also find the exact colored pencils. This is actually a mixed media artwork. I also wanted to put this paper through its paces enough to see if it worked good with colored pencils. Here's me coming back after letting it fully dry to put on another layer. This allows me to check many techniques in one painting as well, as the fact that I wanted to make a good painting version of the thing I'd already painted in my sketchbook. This fish is not a real species of fish, and I use a lot of blending and gradient techniques. I'm softly blending in with very wet brushes to put these layers on now. I also decided to do this artwork because I can test lifting to see how well lifting works in this paper, because I need to use lifting techniques to brighten the places between the implied scales on the body of the fish. It should also be stated that this fish is an entirely fictional species and is not directly based on any species. Although it's quite inspired by betta fish, it is not actually a real species of fish at all. These colors involve neon or opera colors, particularly a very vibrant opera pink called Peach Blossoms in the Himimiya gouache, as well as extremely vibrant colors, including radiant dye and other things I'm using to brighten them up as much as possible. I'm not caring about the light fastness because they'll be behind glass in a dim hallway, and if it eventually fades, I'll either repaint it or exchange it for a new artwork. Not everything lasts forever, but sometimes having those super vibrant colors is worth not having them be light fast. If you know it's not light fast, you can work with it willingly. However, when you're making commissions for other people, you either need to warn them about light fastness or be respectful and only use it the most light fast material as you can. However, in this case, the additional issue with it is that it photographs quite well, although it's actually even more glowing and vibrant in real life versus the video. It, however, scans terribly. The pink colors mostly vanished in the scan, and when you see the tail of the fish later, that was a completely different shade that wasn't even close to the way it looks on video, let alone how much more vibrant it is in real life. This is not an appropriate color to use for scanning to print in a book. I don't advise you use neon or opera colors if you're trying to scan them and save them, although you can adjust it. Here I'm doing those lifting techniques I spoke about. I'm wetting the areas and tapping a clean paper towel down to try to lift up brighter scales. Lifting worked decent, but not incredibly well. So I don't think this paper is ideal for lifting techniques. It holds onto the color a little well, which is good to note because that's important to know for the techniques you're going to use on the paper. It, however, can still do some lifting, so it's not impossible, just not the best. I'm finding that I needed to adjust things a little because I had remembered a couple of the colors a little inaccurately. The face of the fish was actually supposed to be a more bright yellow creamy color, so I hope that by the end I brightened it up enough. By the end I'm extremely happy with this painting. The green for the eye is also a vibrant tone, one of the ones I mixed knowing it isn't light fast, by using radiant dyes. As you can see, various shades of glowing neon reds, very glowing bright reds, and bright glowing orange, as well as for the highlight, an almost yellow color, which is still towards the orange, so a golden yellow. This is the neon red color I mixed up, which is a combination of Ponceau and Peach Blossom. Different levels of that, and I believe I also used some Radiant, Dr. P.H. Martin Radiance. They do separate out a bit from the gouache or the watercolor, but you can mix them back in with your brush and just use them on the page. So it's not a big deal that they separate out slightly. You can also pre-wet, pre-mixed colors, which are in empty half and full pans, to use for whatever you desire, which is what I do. I order empty half and full pans on Amazon, and I make my own pre-mixed colors. You can re-wet colors by closing the lid and usually putting good water. Demineralized is better to prevent molding. You can also spray isopropyl alcohol to prevent molding, which is what I've been doing. I'm creating a gradient here by painting the darkest colors up, then switching to the next color as I continue going along. I want the lines to stand out a little, so I'm not trying to blend them completely in because the lines themselves are part of the design and are supposed to be there. Whereas it's more of a smooth gradient in the between colors of the fins. It's beautiful and vibrant and glowing, and it actually is even brighter and more glowing in real life versus the video. It is not ideal to do this if you're trying to reproduce the art, however. Like I said, it didn't scan well at all. I did scan it before framing it. I'm using the same technique along all the fins after working out exactly how I did it and remembering how I did it initially in my sketchbook. I hope you agree that the contrast between the dark, not quite as vibrant turquoise and the extremely vibrant orangey reds and cool reds in the shadows is an absolutely beautiful look and is one of my favorite things about the overall piece. I also love the pink, the bright pink of the lotus flower juxtaposing. As I continue on, you see I'm adding these vibrant green, glowing sunset green I call it, a special color I mixed up myself, swirly designs. This is a more abstracted, surrealistic piece rather than a direct one-to-one representation of reality. This is the exact same color of the eye of the fish. I have my sketchbook open off screen in front and slightly above the painting, which has a book holder holding open the sketchbook so I can see the original art. But I'm not copying everything one-to-one. I'm using it as a reference and a starting point. In the original sketchbook, the lotus was actually above the fish, not beside, and the layout was much more of a square. It also wasn't a specific finished page, it was just originally a rough sketch that turned out really amazing. So I redistributed and moved things around. I'm actually doing this entirely freehand. So I had to be very bold, because if I made a mistake or wanted to change something, it would be extremely difficult to do, because lifting is not super easy on this. But I found I could do the swirls the way that was more instinctive. You had to be in the right headspace and mood to do something like this. I'm coming back in here with a gouache that is a very dark gray, brownish black, a color I mixed up a while back. I believe this is actually a color I call Lechonk Black, which is the body color of Lechonk, the Pokemon I made a life-size wall decoration out of, so I have extra of the paint mixed up. I'm using it here to add the darkest shadows, some outlines, and these abstracted swirl designs. I'm mixing things up. Sometimes the circular designs are filled in, and sometimes they're left blank. I'm also going to be going over this, as I said much earlier in the video, with some colored pencil of various tones, but with a sort of unified color palette. This is the base layer, which is just in watercolor and gouache. And in this case, actually, mostly gouache, though there was a little bit of watercolor in parts of the fish. I decided to use the rough side, or the correct side of the paper, because the colors look slightly more vibrant on it, and I wanted this painting to present very vibrantly. I also wanted to test the correct side more, so I decided to work on that side to see if I can do mixed media well. This paper is quite good, even though I'm absolutely certain it's cellulose, but I still use cellulose paper because it's much less expensive than 100% cotton, which is superior, however. In this case, I found that the colors looked exceptionally well, and there wasn't too much trouble dragging across. As usual, I needed to water down the gouache a little to pull across the page. I find gouache is an excellent medium that I very much enjoy. As you can see, I'm starting to go in with the colored pencils. I used a mix of various brands, Derwent Drawing, Polychromos, and I think I also used Faber-Castell Goldfaber, that's what they're called. And I'm using a mix of turquoise and reddish brown colors and brown tones as well in the colored pencils in here. I also used Prismacolors, I believe, and I brightened up some of the edges of the scales with a very vibrant blue tone. As you can see, I'm going over a lot of these areas, and I'm making shaded and various tones. The Koh-i-Noor pencils that have multiple colors in one remind me that I can do that more with all my colored pencils, so I'm intentionally layering different colors and making gradients as well as color transitions on purpose. Overall, colored pencils were not the easiest to use on this paper, and I found it was more laborious and took more pressure from my hand and more force to pull across it. The paper is, however, built for watercolors, not colored pencils, so that's not entirely surprising. You can, however, still use them on the surface, but it should be noted that it's actually a little harder to do that, so be prepared to put in the extra effort if you're going to do so. As you can see, I'm going back and forth between using a very dark chocolate brown for the darkest colors around here, which is a Derwent Drawing pencil, as well as various reddish browns and orangey browns in general to make all these swirly designs. I also have abstracted simplified flowers that appear somewhere on the edges of various sections. I make these bubbles or circles. I've been doing this a lot in my art lately in my sketchbook, and I think it's rather nice. Long, swirling, natural-looking lines and circles, as well as floating bubble designs around. I've been looking a lot at Art Nouveau and doing more Art Nouveau-based things, so I think that's part of the inspiration behind this recent trend in my art. For whatever reason, this is one of my more preferred artworks I've made recently. In the original sketchbook version, the dark gray used for the leaves of the plants was used to outline the outside of the lotus to provide better contrast with the background. In some ways I prefer that look, but in some ways I prefer this one's look. From a distance, the top of the lotus does blend more into the background, which I don't prefer, but I also like how it kind of looks like it's glowing above the flower, if that makes any sense. Although that's just an opinion, and I like both versions, this one and the sketchbook. This one is my preferred one. And here's a final look at the finished piece. Once again, that's all for this video. If you like my videos, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to all notifications so you will know when a new video comes up. I aim for new videos every Wednesday, but sometimes life happens and things are delayed. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you with another one very soon.